Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning. Happy Monday. Morning, Ayo. Morning, Rufai. What are you
Morning.
guys doing? What are you showing Ayo? What's happening? What did I miss?
Yeah, that's it.
All righty, let me tell you about what is happening around the world. Let's start here on the African continent, where nearly 50 bodies from 2 mass graves in Libya's southeastern desert have been found by the country's authorities. It's the latest tragedy involving people seeking to reach Europe through the North African country. Now, security forces say 1 mass grave was found on Friday in a farm in the southeastern city of Kufra, containing 19 bodies. Now, the remains were taken for autopsy, but as you can imagine, a harrowing situation. You do have also reports of authorities finding people who had been taken hostage, people who had been tortured. So a very, very dire situation happening over in Libya. Moving on to our favorite bit of news, of course. US President Donald Trump says he will introduce new 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports into the United States on top of existing metals duties. This is another major escalation of his trade policy overhaul. Now, he is expected to announce the new metals tariff at some point today, Monday. Trump also said that he will announce reciprocal tariffs on Tuesday or Wednesday to take effect almost immediately, applying them to all countries and matching the tariff rates levied by each country. So, still very much in his tax and tariff backpack there. See what we got.
So a couple of things. My heart really goes out, to the people that might have lost their lives. But I mean, so when the first blowback started as a result of the Lampedusa crisis, where migrants were trying to go through Libya and all of that, there was something also established that most of the groups that help traffic these people also violate their rights, hurt them, and when there are disagreements, kill them and bury them in shallow grave. And this revelation in Libya just bolsters that narrative, and it's very sad. And the funny thing, it's not today it's been happening.
No.
I can tell you way back the late 90s that I've been hearing the gist about some Nigerians trying to go through that route, Niger, Libya, and they'll cross over a dingy boat out there. So this coming out of the part like this shows that, and there are many more shallow graves. In fact, in one of the graves where they saw 30 people, some of the people were saying 70 people were actually buried in that shallow grave. So it's a very dire situation. Look at how people are just, are destroyed because they want to seek greener pasture, because they want to seek a better life. And this is minus the people that die in the desert, because the journey is always through the desert, that they die in the desert, that they just, flung their bodies in the desert. Going through the desert, you see a lot of carcasses of people like that. Very sad. I think as regards Trump and his tariff, there's a cartoon that shows Trump trying to pee into a fan, and the fan was blowing.
Yes.
And the pee was coming back to him.
Yes.
And they said tariffs. And that's exactly what you do when you try to impose tariff. You think it's going to hurt the other economy, it's hurting you in return. Because when you still buy for them, it is your company that bears the brunt. They will increase the price for people.
Correct.
He has formally done the steel tariff thing against Canada. Now he's trying to do it again. The argument is that it's going to bolster the steel industry. Yeah, share price of Hyundai Steel and a couple of other steel companies are falling around the world, but it doesn't bolster any local production. Because you should not forget, and this was the argument Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was making, that for every millions of jobs, over 2.5 million jobs that he's saying is lost in the manufacturing sector, he's gained over 7.5 million in the digital service sector.
Right.
The reason why manufacturing is not top-notch in America again is that there's a pivot to service sector jobs. Not every economy is going to be able to run on manufacturing shift jobs any longer. And that's why you have a new economy. This guy wrote a book, Henry Ford wrote a book in the 20s. He calls it Today and Tomorrow, where he says we'll be pioneers of the future. As at the time he started factory work job, he fought for the first increased minimum wage, just about $4 per day or thereabout. As at that time, that was an industrial sector. Today we have technology, things are changing. So when you're slamming this tariff, you're saying you're protecting the local steel industry. In the end, you hurt them even further. And the flip side of that is, a lot of people have also argued that this tariff he's doing is to be able to pay for the tax cut for his rich friends, which he's giving them. And all of these are inflationary in nature. probably at some point along the line, when he feels his way in his dark and he sees it doesn't working, he's going to retract on the decision because Trump is known to fumble and wumble. I am not hearing the backstory of what really happened to the Canadian withdrawal of tariff that he first did. It was because the share prices of his friends like Elon Musk, a couple of other billionaire companies, were falling. That's why I quickly retracted on that.
Right.
So it just is the back and forth that happens with Trump that shocks me.
Agreed.
All right, so let me come back to Libya. So beyond even those who die in the desert, even those who die when boats capsize, you know, these dingy boats capsize. We've talked about this a lot of times. Why Libya? Libya is one of the key transit points on the African continent for migrants or asylum seekers who are seeking refuge in Europe.
Yes.
A lot of times when we hear stories like this, people assume that it's for economic migration. But many times it's people who are fleeing war-torn countries, who are fleeing places where there's threats to their lives, their livelihoods, and so they're seeking greener pastures. Libya itself is a host of asylum seekers. There are hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers whose destination is Libya, while some of them proceed to, to try to get to Europe. You can understand why many of them would try to escape when you hear stories like this of shallow graves. This is where we then call on the United Nations, Refugee, Asylum Seekers and Refugees Commission, Human Rights Commission as well, to look into this case. This is not the first time. For decades it's been happening. Human traffickers are taking advantage of this, and they have been using that to, to either traffic the human beings or shoot on sight. In fact, what has been said is that these innocent people who are fleeing already ravaged areas get to find a worse fate in Libya. And the only crime they have committed is trying to find safety for them and their families. I think it's very important because usually when we talk about migration, especially now with the whole, with the West kicking against migration, there's a skewed narrative to imagine that everyone who is running away as a result of economic opportunities. That's not so. When you hear, I worked with asylum seekers and refugees when I was in Wales, and when you hear the stories of these people, in fact, what it took them to be able to arrive at their final destination, you would see that it wasn't an option that it took lightly, or if they had another choice opportunity, they would stay put in their homes. It also speaks to even the African continent and how we must get democracy right. A lot of these war-torn areas are areas where they are fighting for resources, military coup takeover, civil unrest, wars and the likes, and they haven't been able to, they've not been settled in years. It's a different thing when you go and try to abuse the process by lying about your status, saying that you're facing persecution in your home country, thereby denying people who have genuine reasons for fleeing their home country. So it's really sad to see that people, these people who are seeking for a better life are taken advantage of in Libya as a result of this. And I'm hoping that, more investigation has gone on for too long. Can Africa even fix its own problems without us having to look to the West to, to sort us out? An interesting story I saw earlier, and I thought, let me just highlight it, was, and I don't know if you've taken it at all, President John Mahama cutting down and saying that the people's money it should be spent prudently, and has said that any travels by his officials have to be approved and no first-class travels for any of his officials. So he's really trying to be prudent. It's his first few months in office, and I thought that was a really good example to follow. We often talk about cutting the cost of governance back home, so it's great to see an example like that, that you're a public servant, you're an official to serve the people. It's not there for largesse and extravagance and the likes. I wonder
if Elon Musk will take a note from that in his, Department of Government Efficiency. Thank you, Ayo.
Okay, Libya is bordered by 6 countries, including Niger, Chad, Tunisia, Algeria. So you have many of these surrounding countries, Ethiopia, having people, trying to, flee to Europe through Libya, which is a major transit point. Now, the chaos was amplified by the NATO-backed assault on the government of Muammar Gaddafi, resulting in the toppling and the removal of Gaddafi's government in 2011, creating a situation whereby Libya has been taken over by 2 different governments in the east, in the west, and all kinds of gangs across the area, creating a more porous opportunity and encouraging human traffickers to think that they can operate freely. Now, Human Rights Watch and other groups, and also the United Nations from their statistics, have recognized that this is a major problem. This is not the first time that mass graves will be found in Libya. This time around, it was in southeastern city of Kufra, the 2 mass graves that you talked about. Now, this should be a teachable moment for persons who think that they can escape to Europe either through the desert or through the sea. Right. In other words, to say that illegal migration is fraught with dangers, with risks, and there are challenges that are involved. And if there are Nigerians, other Nigerians, who are so stubborn as those people who go to scoop fuel when a tanker collapses or capsizes, they should know that this is another lesson about the dangers that await illegal immigrants. Not only Kemi Badenoch complaining, or Trump saying that he's going to, deal with illegal migrants, even on the way. There are dangers. In other words, the teachable thing there is that go legally. Now, Trump, quickly. Over the weekend, Trump did a number of things. Now, he said he was imposing 25%, import tax on all aluminum metals and steel coming to the United States, 25%. Now, the country that will be most hit is Canada. Canada supplies 79% of the aluminum metals that go into the United States. Other metals come from South Korea, Mexico, Brazil, and all of that. Previously, when he was president in his first term, he had tried to work out a deal with these countries. Biden extended concessions also to the European Union, the UK, to Europe generally. Now, what he's doing is that he's reversing the concessions that he gave. He's also reversing the negotiations that the Biden administration had. Then, to further compound it, he's talking about reciprocal tariffs that will be announced Tuesday, Wednesday. Yeah. The 25% on aluminum will be today. The third thing that he said over the weekend was to officially sign an executive order naming February 9 the official Gulf of America Day. This is the Gulf of Mexico, and he's going ahead with taking it over. But the main thing is about reciprocity. He says if they charge us, we will also charge them. Now, China's tariffs is going to take effect today. So what this means is an escalation of trade war, the future of which nobody knows in terms of the uncertainty. China is now imposing tariffs also on coal and liquefied natural gas from the United States, 25%. That takes effect today. 10% on crude oil. Now, they are probing PVH, the owners of Hilfiger and Calvin Klein. They are interrogating and investigating Google. Everybody. They are also placing a ban on rare metals like titanium, which is used for manufacturing in aviation and all that. So what we will find is a trade war. China has gone to a WTO to file a formal complaint, but the ultimate people that will lose will be the global community and also the American citizen to whom the cost will be passed.
Agreed. Well, thank you all for your great analysis. Let's move on to the papers this morning. And as ever, we begin with the front page of This Day. Now, this morning, This Day's picture headline has a photograph from the first-year remembrance ceremony for the late Dr. Herbert Doreen and Chiziwigwe, which took place in Lagos yesterday. Our very own Ayomaro Ese was one of the hosts on stage and did a great job. She did. So we played a report from the event earlier on in the show, and it will be repeated throughout the day. Now, staying with This Day, there was also a groundswell, the report says, of opposition to the introduction of a fresh 4% administrative charge on free on-board value of imports by the Nigeria Customs Service. This is as well as the proposed 15% increase import charges by the Nigerian Ports Authority earlier. Well, this over the weekend. Moving on to the New Telegraph, it has a stark warning from the president of the Diabetic Association of Nigeria, which says that the mass exodus of health workers will create a powder keg if not addressed. Now, 2,000 doctors in Nigeria are handling millions of diabetes patients in Nigeria. NAFTAC also explains why it believes that these peddlers of fake drugs should face the death penalty. The Vanguard also leads with the story. It talks about JACBA, underfunding, inefficiency, and the undermining of public hospitals, all contributing to the depletion in the number of doctors that we see in Nigeria. And staying with healthcare as well, The Guardian looks at the public power crisis rocking University Teaching Hospital, UCH in Ibadan. It's taking somewhat of an embarrassing toll on the flagship tertiary hospital and the public whose well-being depends on it. Now, the sprawling federal government-owned health facility has been in blackout for 107 days and is only powered by generating sets, inverters, rechargeable lamps, and solar-powered fans, as provided by the management and sometimes by desperate care seekers themselves. The Punch leads with the topic of the 70,000 naira minimum wage. State salaries rise by 90% to 3.8 trillion. 27 states still depend on federal allocations in order to pay salaries in the first place. And there's still some form of conversation about the creation of more states. It's just madness, isn't it? The Tribune features the Federal High Court in Lagos ruling that the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, the FCCPC, retains jurisdiction over competition and consumer protection matters in the telecommunications sector, reinforcing its authority over industry giants such as MTN Nigeria. Now, The Independent of the UK, its headline also touches on immigration. Now, there is a lot of anger in the United Kingdom over the Labour Party's releasing videos of immigration raids in a reported attempt to appease Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. Now, the Home Office has been launching a fresh wave of immigration raids for illegal working and boasting of record numbers of deportations as Labour, as we said, attempts to counter the growing political threat from the Reform UK Party. Now, ahead of the second reading of a new border security bill today, officials have announced that both illegal working visits and arrests since Labour came into power had soared by about 38% compared with the previous 12 months. So as you can imagine, a lot of people around the world, in the United Kingdom, United States, are looking at immigration quite closely.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, Adefemi, but thank you so much for taking us through the papers. Sure. I just think there's such a focus on health this morning, and we shouldn't take it lightly. In many papers where they talked about different angles of the crisis we face if we don't pay attention to this Japa syndrome with a lot of doctors, just fleeing. But we'll see you again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.